All right. Hello and welcome to yet another very special episode of the Mike Sennello Show, where we will be interviewing our first Board of Finance candidate in this series of interviews, Diane Klaif. Before we get to that, just to remind everybody of what the schedule is coming up. After tonight's interview with Diane Klaif, tomorrow at 8 p.m., we'll be interviewing fellow Board of Finance candidate Joe DiGregorio. And then on Thursday, we'll cap this week's of interviews with our interview with Town Council candidate and incumbent Sal Rankowitz. That's going to happen at 7 p.m. on Thursday. We are in the process of scheduling. Scheduling an interview for next Sunday night. We're in the process of scheduling an interview for next Wednesday night. I'll let you guys know as more information rolls in exactly when those are and who will be interviewing. As I've mentioned throughout the course of this series too, if you are a candidate for elected office here in New Milford and you want to come on the stream and chat, regardless of party, love to have you on. Reach out to me and we'll get an interview set up for you. If we don't have an interview scheduled for Sunday night, we'll just do a regular show as we have been doing for the past few weeks on this channel. So that's the schedule upcoming. And as I've always do with these interviews, they're live interviews, and for a reason, we've talked about that. And every interview will cap with your live Q&A. So this is your opportunity to press these candidates. This is your opportunity to have direct access to these candidates. Again, if you've got tough questions to ask, get them in now. If you're watching at home on YouTube, get them in the YouTube comment section. If you're watching at home on Facebook, get them in the Facebook comment section. We'll get to your Q&A as soon as we're done with this interview, and we'll forward those questions on to our guest, who is tonight Board of Finance incumbent and candidate Diane Klaif. Diane, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for having me.
So before we get started, we weren't going to actually do any plugs today, so let's just go ahead and dive right into our conversation. As we always do, I like to introduce the viewers and our fellow residents of New Milford to the person before we introduce the candidate. So as everybody knows, we start off with the same question with all of these interviews. Diane, what brought you to New Milford?
Oh, I didn't realize that was the same question. I would have prepared better. What brought me to New Milford was I was living in New Jersey, very, very long time in New Jersey. And I was looking for a place to come to on occasion to just get away from it all, like within a 2-hour radius of where we lived. And I didn't like anything in New Jersey or Pennsylvania or New York. And my friend said, have you checked out Candlewood Lake? I'd never heard of it. And here I am 8 years later, living here very happily. Love it here in New Milford.
Interesting. You went from New Jersey to Connecticut based on Candlewood Lake. That's really interesting.
I did.
That's a new one for me.
Beautiful here. I was really looking for quiet. I've about 10 years ago, I developed tinnitus, which is ringing in the ears. And I really needed to get away and be absolutely quiet. No TV, no chatter, no nothing. And so being here is a real slice of happiness for me.
That's very understandable. I dated a girl who lived in Midtown East in Manhattan, and man, getting to sleep at night was kind of tough. I won't lie. So you moved to New Milford from New Jersey. How long ago was that, out of curiosity?
2013, we purchased our house. It needed a lot of work. And so while the work was being done, I would come up here and oversee things. My husband and I would do that. And as it got more done, I was here more and more often. So probably around 5 years ago is when I was here pretty much 100% of the time.
And you were able to find work?
Able to find work?
You were able to find work around here too?
Oh, I wasn't working here.
Oh, okay. All right.
I volunteer. I'm a big volunteer.
Great. Great. So you actually have time for these sort of things then. So,
yes, I do.
So on that note then, what got you interested initially in politics here in New Milford?
You know, I hate to say I'm interested in politics in New Milford. I like to say that I'm civic minded.
Okay. I'm
not really, the political stuff. I love politics, but do I feel that I'm a politician? No, I don't. So, yeah. So I had a very wonderful corporate life. But when my kids were getting older and it was more difficult to travel and all of that, I became interested in town goings on. We live in Summit, New Jersey. And I happened to have a couple of friends, including my son's best friend's father, who were council people. And so I used to attend the council meetings and just enjoyed them. And I liked being in the know and involved. And so a councilman passed away, unfortunately, very unexpectedly. And the Republican parliamentarian asked me if I would be interested in, actually it was a council person, if I would be interested in running for his seat. And I said, sure. So I, put myself forward at the convention.
This is in New Jersey?
Excuse me?
This is in New Jersey?
This was in New Jersey, yes.
Okay.
And there were maybe 3 or 4 of us who were vying for the seat. And at the end of it, when we were all done with our little speeches, the parliamentarian stood up and she said, just point of order, need to make sure that each of our candidates are registered Republicans. And I raised my hand and I said, I'm undeclared. And she said, I'm so sorry, we can't consider you. So about, I don't know, 2 or 3 years later, I thought, I still really liked being involved and with town goings on. So I decided to run. So I ran for council, and for 2 times I was elected for 2 3-year terms. And one of those terms I was council president.
So your experience then in town government extends beyond your experience here in New Milford then?
Yes.
All right. So to that extent then, you've actually served on boards and commissions previous to your experience in the Board of Finance. You want to talk about those?
Sure. Well, I started off as PTO president for my kids' elementary school. And then, over the years, we lived there for a long, sorry?
And that's here in New Milford?
No, this is back in Summit, New Jersey.
Okay.
I thought you were asking me about then.
So we moved on from Summit, New Jersey. You had your experience there and you came to New Milford. What are some of the boards and commissions you served on here in New Milford before you joined the Board of Finance?
Okay. I started off on the Charter Commission.
The Charter Revision Commission, correct. Okay.
Yes. Back in 2007. And I was a member of that board. And it was an interesting opportunity for me because having served as a council person in a completely different kind of government, I brought a different perspective to it. In fact, Pete Helmus was on that board with me, and he said that that's one thing that he really appreciated that I brought to that board. So I served on the Charter Commission, and then let's see, I was on the Plan of Conservation and Development, which is really kind of my first love. I love land use. I was on the planning board for a very long time in New Jersey, and I really enjoyed it. And I worked on a couple of master plans there, which is kind of like a POCD, just a different word. And so I very much enjoyed being on the POCD. It was with a group of really, really great, very dedicated, very intelligent people. And then Pete Bass asked me to join the Board of Finance as an alternate. So that was 3 years ago. And I was an alternate for, I would say, about a year and a half. And then our vice chair, Beth Farber, her work commitments got difficult and she had to step down. So Pete appointed me to her full-time position. And now I'm running for that actual job. And then about a year ago, I was appointed to the Riverfront Revitalization Committee as well. So 4 committees.
Yeah, and the Riverfront Revitalization Committee is one you're currently serving on ongoing, correct?
Yes.
All right. So we've kind of gotten the impetus to join the Board of Finance. Just so folks know at home, we will get into that a little bit more and the differentiation between the types of seats that are on the Board of Finance, because it is kind of unlike some of the other boards and commissions like the town council that draw more people's attention, where there's no difference between one seat and the next with a town council. So I really want to delve into the Charter Revision Commission, because I think there was a lot of the Charter Revision Commission recommendations that were then subsequently passed at referendum. Reminder, folks, passed at referendum whenever we talked about all this stuff, that had some pretty serious effects on the Board of Finance and the role thereof. So what were some of those primary areas of focus that the Charter Revision Commission was looking at during that time?
Well, 2 in particular didn't really have a lot to do with the Board of Finance, but they were quite important. And we did a lot of background in digging to see if they made sense for the town. One of them was whether we should employ a town manager, and did a lot of research and didn't make the recommendation because they're hard to find in Connecticut. There are very few people who are skilled or qualified to be a town manager. And through a lot of conversations with towns who had switched to a town manager and then switched back, it turned out that it just hadn't worked out as well as they had hoped it to, and the cost, the salary and benefits were a concern as well. So that was one. And the other one was whether to take the council positions and make those staggered terms. And then the one that really made a big difference for finance was I forget the actual dollar figure. It might have been $250,000. Whenever the finance director wants to invest the town money in, a CD, some sort of interest-bearing, account, she used to be able to do that without approval from the Board of Finance.
Well, it was a much higher threshold, as I recall, for before a Board of Finance.
Much higher threshold. You're right. Yes. And we made a recommendation to lower that threshold considerably, and it was passed.
Okay. So there's two other things that I think that were pretty important to that process, and they relate to the budget, which I think is one of the biggest noisemaker, if you will, with the Board of Finance locally when it comes to, and it's one of the few things that we know going into the year is going to be something the Board of Finance is going to have to look into, and that's going to occupy a lot of their times, is the budget. We do this every year, and it's something you're going to have to take into consideration. And there were some process changes that were recommended by the Charter Revision Commission, and which, of course, subsequently passed at referendum. Let's start with the bifurcation of the two budgets, the Board of Education budget and the municipal budget. And as far as the budget process is concerned, when it comes time to vote on them at referendum, talk about what was the impetus for doing that and how that wound up manifesting.
The bifurcation, I don't recall it being not bifurcated.
Oh, so it used to be that if the Board of Education, let's say the municipal budget failed at referendum, that you'd have to review the entire budget and repass both sides of the budget. And now
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. We just felt that it was very difficult. There are many reasons, but in a nutshell, it's very difficult to ensure that both budgets were adequate and able to be approved at the same time. And it's a horrible shame if, the Board of Ed budget is turned down and the town budget is approved and you have to go back and, revise them both. It just didn't make any sense. So we decided that it didn't make any sense, and the people agreed.
So the other half of that too is that if a budget fails, it used to have to go back to town council before it would go then to a second referendum. Now, after the Charter Revision Commission's recommendations for the revisions, now it's kicked back to the Board of Finance. You want to talk about what the thinking was for that and why that was recommended?
I'm not sure that I can recall why it was recommended. I honestly don't know. When we were doing the charter, when we were in the midst of the charter revision discussions, we were each assigned to different tasks. And so did I get down into the weeds with that particular one? No, I did not. I'm sure it was discussed overall, but I didn't dig into that.
So what would be your thoughts then, just very generally speaking in a nutshell, of why you would either be in favor of or not so in favor of making that change so that when the budget fails, it's oversight on the second go around is from the Board of Finance rather than the town council? Is that something that you think is a good idea, a bad idea? What are your thoughts?
I think it's a good idea. It's funny. I find that politics play too big of a role in Connecticut and in town business. And as a Board of Finance member, I don't feel political at all. And I don't think that, I don't know, I could be wrong. I don't think that my fellow Board of Finance people feel that way either. We just don't do I notice that anyone is like, a Democrat and I'm a Republican? No, I know that they are, but I don't think about it. And the way that we discuss anything, there's no bifurcation with our what we're interested in discussing, what we're interested in supporting or not. It's very much all over the place.
Do you think that's any different from the town council?
I do. I do. I find town council to be much more political.
Okay.
A little bit polarized.
All right, that's fair. Let's talk about some of the considerations that were either had and not made as far as recommendations are concerned, because they do kind of affect the Board of Finance here moving forward. So what were those? To talk about some of the considerations, maybe not the specific considerations, but like why certain things may or may not have been left off of the recommendations that finally went to referendum.
Well, I indicated the town manager just didn't make any sense. It sounds like a good thing to do. It seemed odd to me, coming from a municipality where we did have a town manager, that whoever is voted in as a mayor may not have the skill set. In fact, it will be unusual for someone who didn't come from a town council seat to become mayor, to actually run the town and all of the departments within it. It's a tremendous learning curve. And for like a newbie to come into that mayoral position and have to do it, it's an incredible risk.
So then in that case, that almost sounds like a rationale for having a town manager who you would hire rather than elect.
Correct. But
okay.
The research that we did, talking to the other municipalities in Connecticut, told us that, it might have worked in New Jersey. It's going to be very tough to work here in Connecticut. It's just a different state.
So there was a proposal, there was a consideration that was presented to the CRC to dissolve the entire Board of Finance. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what the Board of and what the CRC thought of that proposal.
We thought it was absurd. Why? That was it. Why? If it's not broke, why try to fix it?
Okay.
Board of Finance, I think, does a great job and sees things from a different perspective.
So one of the final things as we're wrapping up our conversation here on the CRC, because it's a charter revision, so that's a big deal to me. Like we're talking about the fundamental documents that form the basis of all government here in New Milford. So I think it's a really important service that you are providing here, and it's really something I want to spend some time on, just because again I think it was a really important thing. Were there any changes that you would like to see at the next assembling of the CRC at this point?
Wow, man, Mike, you're talking about, we did this back in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's always worthwhile going back and looking at the things that have been discussed and see if they make sense in today's, circumstance. So I think everything that has been discussed in the past in numerous charter revisions are always worth looking at. But, to be able to bring someone in who has a different perspective like myself, I think is really important. And so I think I would recommend that, when peopling the next one, try to get some people who have experience, not locally.
So with other towns, here's what you're saying.
Yes.
All right.
Even other states.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the mayor, on that note then, the mayor, so there's a legal obligation to form a charter revision commission every 10 years and to review the charter. The mayor actually indicated at a previous interview, folks can find that on my channel, both on YouTube and Facebook. Mayor said that he'd like to see a charter revision commission put together every 3 to 4 years, even if they don't recommend any changes. So your thoughts on that? He said 3 to 4 years. What do you think?
I don't know why. I guess, sorry, my dog is scratching at the door. I guess that, things have changed exponentially with COVID. So maybe that would be a reason to do one sooner rather than later.
All right.
I haven't thought about it. I mean, I thought 10 made sense. It took forever to do it. It was a big
Almost a
undertaking,
year. Yeah.
very, very big undertaking. So, to do it more often than say maybe 5 years, I think it would be a chore.
Okay. So moving on then from the Charter Revision Commission to the Board of Finance, we talked about how those revisions may have affected the Board of Finance. Let's talk about the actual Board of Finance now. So generally speaking, what do you see as the role of the Board of Finance?
Uh, well, obviously it's to balance the wants and the needs of the residents of New Milford in a fiscally responsible way.
Okay.
And so we discuss, we discuss a lot of things about how to do things in a smart way. What should go into the capital budget, what should not. I really love I know I'm getting ahead of things with the ARPA, money that's been thrown at New Milford. We are going to be able to, or at least the recommendations are to take a number of items off of the capital 5-year plan and purchase them using those funds. And so we don't have to bond those items going forward. And so that's great if we don't have to bond something and save some money and perhaps bond something that makes more sense to bond, then I'm all for that. We meet with the auditors. It's interesting to hear the auditors. They think that we're doing an excellent job. We really don't get many recommendations to do anything differently because they feel like we're really like crossing our T's and dotting our I's and asking the tough questions and thinking things through logically. So that's pretty much our role. I mean, I don't think we're going to have any voice whatsoever with the ARPA funds. Just a matter of, if we have something to add as an aside or a suggestion, but we will not be giving a thumbs up or down. There's no vote on how those funds are used.
Yeah, I have in my notes. We'll be getting into the ARPA funds.
Okay.
But right. Yeah, so it sounds like what you're describing. Would you consider the Board of Finance to be something of a fiduciary check on something like a body like the Town Council?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so I guess that would form some of the impetus to balancing of those powers during the Charter Revision Commission recommendations.
For sure, yeah. Another complete set of eyes to look at things, another complete set of brains.
Would you describe the Board of Finance as a policy-making body?
No.
Okay, fair enough. So the board has a degree of discretion built into it, as far as how far it should reach, where it should have some oversight, where lines are drawn, basically. So what should be the discretion? What should the discretion? Where should discretion on the board begin and end?
Well, we have to make sure that how we spend our taxpayers' money is spent in the best possible way. There should be no waste whatsoever. It needs it needs to make absolute sense. So I'll just say that Public Works. It's an easy one to talk about. Public Works has so many trucks, and they always want more trucks and bigger trucks and more up to date and fully fitted out trucks. Well, okay, what do you do with the old trucks? Is there an old truck sales place where you can take your old trucks and get 10 cents on the dollar? And so we ask questions like that. What is happening with the old used equipment? Are we like with the pothole machine?
Yeah.
Great investment in that pothole machine. And there was a lot of discussion around town with, I can't believe we're spending money on a pothole machine. It was a great investment. And do you ever hear anyone complain about a pothole anymore? No, because they're taken care of. But with that and with oh gosh, what's it called? The truck that mixes up the salty.
Oh, the brine truck.
Thank you. The briner. Yeah. We ask things like, are we able to join forces with another municipality, and they can use that sometimes, and we can use their, I don't know, their gum removal equipment for sidewalks and stuff, and we don't have to buy our own gum removal equipment for sidewalks. They don't have to buy their own briner truck. So, a lot of shared services like that are discussed, and if it doesn't make any sense, we ask why. If it does make sense, we say, let's make it happen.
Do you guys actually offer direction then, or is this just a financial oversight?
Usually when we're having our budget discussions, we ask the questions and, get into a give and take with the department managers.
Okay. So then is the direction to, let's say with those trucks, is the direction to say, find another way to do this truck, or is the direction more of just, okay, we're not going to spend this money on this thing until we can find a way to save some money on this? Like, do you actually give direction to these bodies?
Sure, we do that, but it's more often, let's hold that off for another year or two, rather than doing so much this year. Like to spread it out so that we don't increase taxes. We don't want to increase taxes.
And we're going to come back to that too, because again, I'm going to reserve a good chunk of time if we can for the budget, because the Board of Finance, that's probably the only issue that we can know for sure the Board of Finance is going to run into every single year.
Right.
So with that said, though, with all those other departments, what is the relationship between the Board of Finance and the finance director?
Relationship. He does a great job. We ask him tough questions as well. He gives us a report. We just had a report at the beginning of September showing us, how our tax receipts are. I have it written down somewhere around here. Here we go. So it's the beginning of September. 49% of our taxes were collected as of the September report. 49% of our total revenues have been collected, and 18% of expenditures have been expended. And it's normally around 8% at this time. We ask, well, how does that stack up to last year or the past 5 years? And he'll give us the percentage and the reason why, if things are not kind of where they were in the recent years. He said normally it's around 8% at this time, but encumbered payments have been made early and will not result in an average. So encumbered payments would be, let's say, for pension funding. So rather than paying them, each month, it might be the total for the year has been encumbered. And so it looks as if we're way off base, but we're not. If there won't be an additional pension payments made. And he also gets into, the bonding and the bands. And we got the great news that our bond anticipation notes were they got an unbelievably good rate of, I think it's 1.6%, if I can read my scratch handwriting here. No, excuse me. That was bonding, 1.6%, 20-year maturity. And then the bond anticipation notes. So 5 firms bid on it, which is great. They're vying for us. And the rate is 1.49%. So, and we're not paying any, we're just paying interest. We're not paying anything else on that.
Yeah, paying towards
those are the
principal
anticipation notes. So
okay.
He gives us a frequent, I would say 5 or 6 times a year, reports on where we stand. We make sure that things are on course.
So you've mentioned actually now kind of a lot of accounting and financial terms here, anticipated notes. We talked about bonding. You've talked about percentage yields and you talked about financing. You talked about bonding. We talked about kind of a lot of things that are technical terms within the field of finance and accounting. So the Board of Finance to me is something it's kind of a special board in that it's the only one that I can think of that, in terms of the elected offices, that has an academic field of study built into the name of it, finance. It's the only one I know of that the town council isn't. Town and council aren't something that are academic field of study. The mayor's office, mayor, isn't something that's an academic field of study. So what would you say people should be looking for? Is there a special acumen? What should people be looking for in a Board of Finance candidate?
Well, I would say that you would definitely want the majority of your board to have a financial background. I don't have a financial background. I'm a marketing person. Marketing and sales. But because of my 6 years on council and sitting on the finance department itself, and just 6 years of experience, and as council president, we had a weak mayor strong council form of government in Summit, New Jersey. And so council president was pretty much the mayor of the town. And we had a very unusual situation where people in residents in New Milford vote for their budgets, municipal and Board of Ed. In Summit, New Jersey, you're not going to believe this. 7 council members, not the mayor, 7 council members vote on those budgets.
Huh.
Not a single resident, except, we're residents, but 7 of us vote on that.
I don't think residents in New Milford would be a fan of that.
Oh, I'm sure they would not be a fan of that. So as a council person, you learn this. And that's one reason why I'm sure that Pete wanted, asked me to be on the board. I'm used to reading a municipal budget, and the Board of Ed budget is so complicated, but I used to do that as well. And then we also had the county government. We had county taxes as well. So I know how to read those, and I'm familiar with them, and they're a little daunting, but once you've done them, once, twice, 6 times, you can do it.
Right. And you can build up that acumen and experience without having to actually necessarily sit through a college course for something like this.
Correct.
So in serving in the board now, you mentioned that Pete Bass asked you to serve as an alternate at first, and now you're serving as a seated position. You want to just talk briefly so people understand the difference between the seated and unseated positions and the elected versus appointed positions on the Board of Finance?
Sure. I think it's the same for the Board of Ed, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe even zoning and planning. So are there 5 or 7? I don't even know how many members there are. I think there could be 7. Yes, there must be 7. Actual voting members of the Board of Finance. And you need to have a certain number of people voting and attending meetings. And so alternates are appointed as well. And I believe there are 1, 2, 3 alternates. And when there aren't enough voting members to take place in the discussions or the vote that's required to be taken that night, the chairperson, Walter O'Connor, will seat one of the alternates as a voting member. And he alternates by party. 1 month it'll be a Democrat, the next month it'll be a Republican, and go on and on like that. So everyone feels that they get an equal say at the table. And then when, like with me, when, I was an alternate for a year and a half or 2. And when Beth had to step down, I was appointed to fulfill her existing term. So right now I am an appointed Board of Finance member, have been for a little over a year. And I have a vote. And then, so I have to run for the actual position. Now, if Beth were still here and she wanted to be on the finance committee still, then she would run for the position as well.
So with that said, now that you're a voting member and you're a seated member and you're running for the full term seat, let's talk about the Arpa funds, because that's something that apparently you guys have no actual legal oversight, no actual authority to make any decisions upon. Do you see the fact that you guys don't have any actual oversight over what's going to be millions of dollars to spend? Do you see that as let's call it a whole, a potential for a revision at the next Charter Revision Commission?
Wow. Well, I'll speak for myself. I'm a little disturbed that we don't have a say in this, because as a result of having sat on the POCD, which is a 10-year plan that is intended to guide the town, the council members, the mayor, and the planning board and the zoning board, to a plan for how to go forward with either conserving land or building in the town of New Milford. So it's an extremely complex document. It took us about 2 years to finish it because of COVID. It was just adopted. And so it serves as a guideline. And so I would hope that some of this funding, hopefully a lot of this funding, will go towards the recommendations that were put forth in that document, coupled with the fact that I'm sitting on the Riverfront Revitalization Committee, and we have put together, I'm new to that committee. I've only been on it for about a year. I was not on it when the company was hired to, it was hired to Camoin, I think is their name, to make some recommendations for how to improve the Youngsfield area, move DPW to another area, and kind of improve the connection between the riverfront and the downtown, and make it more economically viable, make it more beautiful and useful for recreational purposes and for new housing stock, and to promote mixed use housing. So you'd have businesses, commercial spaces on the ground floor, and a mix of housing on the upper floors. And we're not talking 6 floors high. That would not fly well in New Milford downtown. We respect what is there, and we respect what we're careful to not make any recommendations that would change the flavor of the town. Very careful to make sure that whatever is done, if it's done, it's all just a recommendation. If it's done, will not have a negative impact on anyone's neighborhood, on anyone's view, on commuters, all of that. So I'm just hoping that, and I wish that we did have a say, that those funds were able to make some of that, those recommendations come to fruition.
So speaking on that then, you did get a chance to at least offer effectively a straw poll position at the last Board of Finance meeting. It had no actual, again, legal authority, but there was a vote taken on the recommended expenditures from Town Council that have passed through Town Council at this point. They are supposed to be ostensibly linked to COVID. If you were to have a say in this matter, if you were to have some legal oversight authority, would you consider all of the expenditures that have been approved at least causally linked to COVID, plausibly linked to actual COVID?
There were I have a list of them here somewhere because I knew that this would come up. So yeah, there's safety, of course. There are requests from, fire and police and the ambulance corps. I mean, those obviously are, COVID related and would help in the long run. And I'm horrified by the ambulance situation. People just are not volunteering the way that they used to. And they are desperate for people and for equipment, and just, I wish that I could volunteer. I know nothing about it, and I don't have the time to do it. But the ambulance corps really needs our help. Let's see, the $1 million plus a little bit for the the reservoir. That's a stretch. It's a stretch for me to figure out how that is COVID related. I mean, I've heard people say, well, they use it for recreation. It's open space. People during COVID needed a place to go and get outside and, row their boat or whatever, watch the birds, go fishing. There are a lot of places in New Milford to do that. And is that necessary? I think it's pushing it.
Well, I mean, I imagine it's actually necessary. I imagine it could be seen as altruistic, but the question we have here is it actually causally linked to COVID? It seems like you're
That's
saying
what I'm saying. I could try to make the case, but I think I'd fail.
Okay.
I mean, I do think that it needs to be repaired. It would be a tragedy if that were to fail. A tragedy. So that's not something that we can just, put off and not do. But if we use these funds in a smart way so that we can save money in the budget and use the funds to purchase things that are in the capital plan, then we can capital plan the reservoir.
Okay. Well,
so it might be a trade-off.
I mean, there are competing interests in all considerations. So,
right.
If you didn't have that COVID tie-in requirement, and you guys had a voting say in this matter, and let's say that the fact that the supply of money coming in from the Arpa funds is limited, like if we were to negate that and make it an unlimited supply of funds, would you see? Could you see using the ARPA fund? Would you prefer to use the ARPA funds for something like that dam? Or do you think it would be better to bond something like that? Is that a place for bonding or is that a place for ARPA funds?
It's either or.
Okay. You don't see any difference between bonding that versus using...
No,
was effectively
no, I don't.
grant.
I mean, obviously we don't want to over bond. So it's a good thing to not have to not have to bond that. And I'm sure that's why there's consideration being given to it. It's not a bad idea. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. It needs to be done. I just don't know if the reasoning will fly.
Okay. Well, you seem pretty, you seem like you really wanted to talk about the ARPA funds earlier tonight. So I'll give you a chance to just parting thoughts on the ARPA funds before we move on to the budget.
Okay. So my major takeaway from having sat on the POCD and the riverfront revitalization is that New Milford is aging. And a lot of people young people, they go through high school and then they leave and they don't come back. And young adults don't find that New Milford is, a fun, hip, happening place to be. I mean, I find it annoying to leave a meeting in the evening at 8:30 and there's no restaurant open. It's like, what? Are you serious? I have to go to Taco Bell. I mean, it's kind of weird. And so because we are aging, myself included, housing needs are changing. And there's a huge need for people who are downsizing from the big house, as their kids grow and they don't need the big house. They want to be able to stay in town. And there are not many options to do that. So you have the older population with, the big house. It doesn't have to be an expensive house, just the big house who wants to, downsize it and not have the maintenance and all the troubles with a yard or with a big yard. And then you have young people with children who might want to move here, and there are not that many houses for rent. For a young couple, a young family to kind of get a start in home ownership. You rent for a couple of years, you save up some bucks, and you buy an inexpensive house. The rental market is quite tough, and then there's a lot of people who cannot afford housing. I think our homeless population has been taken care of for the time being. and kudos to Pete for having, and the town council for putting that young man in charge. I forget his name, of finding housing for, for the needy. But I think we need some affordable housing as well, and meaning low cost, not Section 8.
Lowercase
Not
a,
Section
lowercase
8.
h, affordable housing. Yeah.
Yeah. Lower. Yeah. Affordable housing. So I think we need to improve our housing stock across all levels. So I would love to use some of that funding to do that. And yes, I think that's absolutely COVID related.
Okay, well then let's move on to the budget, because I think that might actually have a relationship to all of that. So we've actually talked about the role of the Board of Finance in the budget process. So just to be clear, so folks understand, does the Board of Finance have line item discretion?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
So we've talked about the role of the Board of Finance in the budget process already, but let's just clear this up. Does the Board of Finance have line item discretion when it comes to the budget?
So, in terms of the budget, we're not talking ARPA.
Correct.
We're talking budget.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a kind of a slippery slope. So not really. We can make a recommendation to either delete or put back in an item and provide the funding if it's to put back in, bump up whatever the budget was given, the budget number that was given to us. If we wanted to add something back in or add something that we felt was important, we could send it back to town council with the money approved to make that happen. It is up to them to decide what to do. They can accept the budget with the additional funding and not fund whatever it was that we wanted them to do. All right. So it's a little bit of a slippery slope.
So you don't have the line item discretion. Whatever recommend you. So you guys take off of the top and just make basically verbal recommendations.
Yes.
So that if it doesn't pass, then the next time you guys review it, you guys have the opportunity to review those recommendations.
Correct.
All right. So then we talked about this. We touched up on this too. What are your guiding principles when it comes time to oversee the budget process from the seat on the Board of Finance? What's the guiding principles for you?
I have to repeat it. It's to balance our residents' wants and needs in a fiscally responsible manner.
Okay. Well, then, so
I don't know any other way to describe it.
All right. So what underlies that then? What are things that that would allow you to decide what is a want versus a need when it comes to the budget process?
Do we need an indoor community pool? I think that's a want. Do we need a new roof on the high school? That's a need.
Okay.
It's that simple.
All right. Well, then in that regard, since we're talking about a high school roof, has the Board of Education budget ever been cut?
No, it has not.
Okay.
No, it has not. So in your interview tomorrow night with Joe DiGregorio, Joe has done an excellent job looking at the numbers, looking at websites. He cited all of his sources. Not once in 10 years has the Board of Ed budget been cut.
All right.
He has all of the information. You'll be wasting everyone's time if you want me to do it, to explain what he has done, because he knows that I'd have to be reading from a piece of paper.
Yeah, we did talk about that on the show last night, so you guys can check that out too. We brought up his post. I will bring that up with Joe. You asked me to bring that up to him tomorrow night. Folks, if you're watching at home, we'll be interviewing Joe tomorrow night at 8 p.m. So if you guys want to press him on that too, you guys can do that there too. But on that regard though, since you guys do have some oversight over that end of the process, at least the overall number. So what are your thoughts generally then on the continuing increases in Board of Education budgets despite the continued decline in enrollment?
Again, that's a really tough question. I have to assume, and it could be just an assumption, which is not a great thing to do, that the Board of Ed, when they submit their budget requests, they've done a good job. And I do know that there are a lot of unfunded mandates that are happening now that were not there 10 years ago. I do know that the school population has declined. I do know that we've closed an elementary school because of declining population. On the other hand, I look at something like I was annoyed, I'll use that word. I was annoyed when last year, the transportation budget had increased significantly. And I question, why. It's for the buses, obviously. Why is it up so much? They negotiated a new contract. And do I remember the percentage increase? No, I don't. But it was a 3 or 4 or maybe 5 year, I think it was more like a 3-year contract with, I thought, ridiculously high increases each year. And so it's too late. It's negotiated, they have to pay it, or it's going to have to come out of the budget line somewhere, another budget line somewhere. So, I approved it. Do I think that in the future, there should be more people at the table negotiating something like that? Yes, I do. I don't know whether our finance director is involved in that regard, but I do think that there should be some working together on the town side and the Board of Ed side to make sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck.
So you talked about some specifics when it comes to the Board of Education side of the budget. So what are some line items or just general areas of, say, bloat versus some areas of dearth, let's call it, on the municipal side of the budget?
I didn't understand what you said. Some areas of what?
Let's call it bloat versus areas of dearth.
I didn't understand the word.
Bloat.
Below?
BLOAT.
Oh, bloat.
Yes.
So okay. So say the question again. I could not understand it.
So you talked about some line items with the Board of Education where this might be the case. How about the municipal side? Where are some line items or areas of bloat versus areas of dearth?
I don't know that I can identify either. I mean, we go through those budgets line by line by line. We ask tough questions. We really want to understand why something costs so much. I remember when they were upgrading the IT systems, it seemed high to me. And we asked the department head who was presenting that information, and it's expensive stuff, and you have to make sure that everything is secure and it's just the best that we can do, because it's so easy to hack into things and do some real damage. So I can't say that I can identify some bloat. If I could, then I would have brought it up at a meeting.
How about dearth then? The opposite. How about areas of dearth where maybe there's room to spend more money?
On the municipal side.
On the municipal side, yes. If you can't think of any, that's fine.
I really can't think of any.
All right.
I mean, as a member of the garden club, I can tell you it's very annoying that we don't have more spigots available to water the planters and the gardens that we so carefully maintain and plant each year. We have to lug gallon containers of water in the back of our cars to do it. It's awful. So I mean, that would be a great thing that I would love for them to do. That's a dearth. Put in some spigots.
Putting in some spigots. Okay. So then in that regard, then we've had some surpluses over the last several years. Why the surplus? Why the annual surplus at the end of the year then? You talked about how you want to try to spend as little as we really can, and we really want these budgets to be as tight as we possibly can. So why has there been a surplus?
Well, this past year, the surplus plus is, obviously COVID related. I mean, it was really hard in budget discussions last year to figure out what was going to happen because no one knew what was going to happen. It was anyone's guess. I thought that our the taxes collected would be lower. The percentage would be lower than it is. There's been no problem collecting taxes. People have paid their taxes.
So you're saying that there seems to be a revenue discrepancy.
Not a discrepancy. Not a discrepancy at all. Our tax assessor obviously had better faith in that people would be able to afford their property taxes than I did. I thought that there would be a great problem with that. I thought we'd be collecting much fewer dollars than we did. We really didn't see a problem with that at all. So it was very much a shot in the dark, the budget process this past year. And of course, revenues were nowhere near what they have been in the past because Park and Rec was unable to do any of their programs pretty much. So how do you account for that? It's difficult. And then the state and the federal is throwing cash at us. So of course we have surplus. Now how we're gonna take care of that in the upcoming budget process will be interesting. I mean, I see no reason to keep more money than we should have in reserve. And our reserves are in very good shape. We have enough reserves to get us through 2 or 3 months of, an absolute 100% panic meltdown and keep our municipality going. And that's a great position to be in.
And we will see how that will turn out in February, March, April, and May of next year as we go through that budget process. So, Diane, I appreciate you coming on here. We've just finished up our hour here. Is there anything more you want to say before we get to Q&A? I'll give you just the floor for just a minute while I go look over our streaming.
No, I'm interested to hear what people want to ask me.
All right. Well, we don't have any questions here. Folks, if you guys are actually listening at home, I'm so sorry about the audio technical difficulties that we had here. I guess the reasons that we don't have any questions here for you, Diane, is that we had some serious problems with audio. So folks, I guess we did get it fixed in the middle of this stream. Folks who are listening at home, I will upload the recorded version of this so that you guys can hear the entire thing because we are recording this locally, thank God. So I appreciate everyone who joined in with us. Now that we have the audio fixed, I'm going to ramble on for just a quick second here to give everybody a chance to potentially get those questions in. If you have questions for Diane, go ahead and get them in now, and we'll get them forwarded over to Diane. And it seems the audio is working at home for everyone at this point now that we've gotten everything fixed. So just a reminder for people before we bring all of that in, we're going to be continuing in our series, as we mentioned, with Joe DiGregorio tomorrow night at 8 p.m. And we're going to have Sal Rankowitz on Thursday night at 7 p.m. to finish up the week. I'll be Wednesday night, I'll be attending the PTO's sponsored Board of Education meet and greet. So you get a chance to meet and greet the Board of Education candidates on Wednesday night. That's at 7 p.m. over at Sarah Noble. That's what I'll be up to. On Sunday night, I'm hoping to schedule another interview. On Wednesday night of next week, we're hoping to schedule another interview. If we don't schedule an interview for Sunday night, we will just do the regular show. So again, last call for questions before we sign off here. I'm not really seeing anything from the comments section here on Facebook, and I'm not really seeing anything on YouTube either. So again, sorry everybody for the technical difficulties. I will get this uploaded as soon as I possibly can. Diane, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Mike. It was fun.
All right. Good night, everybody.